Are we there yet? These words were inspired to me this week by the former rector of Incarnation and now Bishop of Toronto, Andrew Asbell, who used these words in a Easter message that he's offered. And just made me think that I'm going to share similar stories that he was telling, because it is actually quite relevant. And I shared similar experiences that he did. That is, I was always really very fond and have wonderful memories of traveling with my family on summer vacation. We lived in British Columbia at the time, and I remember as a young boy, every summer, my mother and father would pack up the car, and my mother would create a little nest in the back seat for my sister and I. We'd pile in there, and my father would turn the big old black Ford eastward to head out towards Ontario. And I was just so excited about that, and could hardly wait to get there and to share my time. And it was just a wonderful part of my time of my life. But I also remember that that thrill of this long journey kind of lasted about an hour. We had 2 days ahead of us. And after about an hour, I would start to get a little bit antsy and get a little impatient and a little frustrated. And my sister and I in the back seat would to cry out loud, "Are we there yet?" And my mother or father, in their patient tone, would say, "Soon." Well, soon was way too long for us. But my mother, being the prepared person that she is, she would provide us things like coloring books and card games and all the kinds of things that kids like to play with. But the best part of the journey was to sit in the window seat, in the window, and look out the window and to play things like I Spy with My Little Eye, or count the telephone poles as they zip by you, or count all of the different colored cars that you could find. And just, it kept us going along the way. But eventually, my sister and I would turn on each other. It was just too much. We would get snicky at each other, and I'd push her and she'd push me back, and I'd draw a line down the middle of the seat and would make sure she wouldn't cross that line in the seat, and we'd snip at each other, and until we'd hear from the front seat, "I want 5 minutes of silence. And if you break that silence, I'm pulling the car over." Well, that would do it, and we would be quiet. Are we there yet? Soon. That seems to be the theme for this year, hasn't it been? Are we there yet? I remember distinctly a year ago right now, actually April the 12th, Easter Sunday, one of the first times we had done a live stream service, and I remember saying to all of you, I said, I look forward, after these weeks and months perhaps that will be locked down, but I look forward to gathering together in our worship space next Easter 2021. Well, here we are. It has been a long, arduous journey for us. We have confronted things that none of us would have ever imagined. We have been challenged in ways we couldn't have foreseen. We have heard of people suffering in isolation and loneliness. Mental health crises have been exacerbated by all of the anxiety and worry and suffering that people have gone through. That this has been a year unlike any other at all. We all say, are we there yet? When will this end? Over the course of the year, we experienced that first wave last spring and early summer, and then there was hope on the horizon. And then again last fall, the second wave came upon us again, and it knocked us down to our knees once more. And here we are experiencing this third wave with no end in sight, perhaps. So I want to ask you a question. And I'm going to ask David Jenkins if he would put up a poll question. I want you to click either yes or no. And the question is, if you had the ability, would you erase the year of COVID? That is, as if COVID had never happened. So just take your little cursor and click either the yes or the no, and let's see how we feel about this. Go ahead. Just take a few more seconds there. Go ahead. Now, David, for your information, I am not seeing the results here, so you'll have to hand them to me later. So I'm going to come back to that in just a moment.
Actually, Michael, I can show them now. Just one sec.
Okay, thank you. So 55% had the ability, the percentage, the majority says yes, they would, as if COVID had never happened, and 45% of you have said no, you wouldn't change it. Interesting, thank you. So I'll come back to that as I've mentioned in just a moment. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him and I will take him away. And Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher. In that first Easter morning, Mary Magdalene, others, the disciples, were living in the midst of Good Friday. They had lost the one they had cherished the most, the one that they had followed for 3 years. His disciples had been with him, had learned from Jesus. And Jesus on Thursday night sat the disciples around the table. He broke bread, he shared wine, he shared with them the commandment to love one another as I have loved you. And he went on to tell them that I must suffer these things so that the prophecy may be fulfilled. Mary Magdalene, and in ritual, came to the tomb in order to anoint the body as any Jewish woman would, only to find that the tomb had been rolled away. Following that, she ran back, probably in fear, to the disciples, to Peter and the unknown disciple who ran to the tomb to look in to see the linen clothes lying by themselves. The feeling and experience of those people must have been one of extraordinary pain and grief and suffering. Prior to Mary coming to terms with the risen Christ in the garden, she must have thought, what is next? What is ahead of me? The disciples, concerned for their own safety, and gathered together in the upper room, and following Jesus's encounter with Mary in the garden, Mary went back and saw the disciples, and Jesus came to them in the upper room, and he offered them the gift of the Holy Spirit. He said, peace be with you. Peace I bring you. And he gifted them the Holy Spirit. The disciples then went into the world and transformed the course of human history. We are living in a time where we wonder, are we there yet? We have all felt suffering and pain along the way. There are so many people in the world that suffer so greatly, and yet they find a way to persevere and to find the ability to transcend that which they are confronted by in their lives. I think that in the midst of this uncertain time of COVID, we have been given an opportunity to learn anew. We have been given an opportunity to reflect on life and the way we have lived as a society and as a culture. We have been given, in the face of this darkness, a light shining on us to assist us in seeing the hope and compassion and the way in which God walks with us in our journeys of life. In a conversation with a friend this week, he helped me understand and see more clearly that in these challenging times, we have also seen amazing moments of compassion, love, and care, neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, stranger to stranger, by virtue of the way we reach out and embrace one another. In these challenging times, we have seen the extraordinary goodness that humans are capable of right around our globe. We've seen what it has done to our environment when we are not traveling as much as we have, where airline travel and the inability to drive on the highways, our environment has increased. It's almost as if Mother Earth has taken a deep breath of fresh air. We have learned to be in a relationship with people we perhaps had not been encountering in months or years. To learn to work at home with families and friends, and to really take account of what things that are most important to us. Now, when we are in the midst of these challenges, when we are suffering and feeling the pain and the anxiety, the loneliness and the isolation, of course, we're not feeling the grace and the compassion that God gives us as gift. It is most often when we look back in hindsight, when we look back on a time of suffering and pain and difficulty, that we recognize that, in fact, God walked with us along that path, that we were not alone. As Mary encountered Jesus in the garden, and Jesus called her by name, Mary, her life was changed anew. She began to live her life in a new way, as the disciples began to live their lives in a new way. In our spiritual selves, in our true self, within our souls and lives, we are okay in the midst of physical and emotional challenges sometimes. It is my hope that we don't go back to the way we were. We continue to allow the light of the Easter message to lighten the darkness that we all experience at some point in our lives, some far greater than others, some people who suffer in ways we can't even begin to imagine. But let's let the light of the Easter message, the risen Lord, walk with us along this journey and lighten the darkness and load for us. We are being reborn in a new way. It may take years, if not decades, to really assess what this past year has done to our society, our culture, and the way in which we as human beings engage and encounter one another. But we must always remember, as Christian people, it is in the risen Christ that we place our hope that all will be well. Are we there yet? Soon, soon. So I'd like now to offer this little song, a song of hope and a song that may uplift you, that in the darkness of Good Friday, the darkness of this past year, the sun is emerging over our horizon.